I don't know if you're talking to me or somebody.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5.
I don't know if you're talking to me or somebody.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5.
On the 28th of April at 6 p.m. to order. First order of business this evening will be to approve the April 14th, 2022 Selectmen meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passed. This is the public forum. Anyone anyone wishing to address the board with any items that are not on tonight's agenda, this is your opportunity to do so. Seeing none, we will move on. Item 4, presentation by the Maine Lobstermen's Association. I would like to invite Kevin Kelly and Chris. Are you going to speak as well? Yeah. And Chris to the podium this evening.
Make sure you get real close and personal.
And talk real loud.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name's Chris Welch. I'm a lobsterman here in Kennebunkport. I live in Kennebunk. I'm also the head of Government Wharf, and I'm a board member for the Maine Lobstermen's Association. I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to give me a chance to give you a little piece about what's going on right now to the Maine lobster industry and what these challenges mean to a community like this right here on the coast that thrives on a tourist community. The problem we're facing, it stems from a 2021 plan by the National Marine Fisheries Service that requires our industry to have a reduction of 98% to an already minimal risk to the North Atlantic right whale. I want to make it clear that there's no Maine lobsterman that has any idea or any plan to harm any whales, and we've maintained compliance for years. Over the last 20 years, we've done multiple changes and different things in order to comply with what National Marine Fisheries Service has put down on us. So what's going on is the Maine Lobstermen Association has filed a lawsuit against National Marine Fisheries Service in order to defend the right to keep fishing. We've been honest brokers, and we've stepped up every time they've asked us to change anything, and we deeply care about our livelihoods as well as the livelihoods of the whales. So I'd stated the Maine Lobstermen Association has filed a lawsuit challenging the government's flawed plan, and we must hold the government accountable for failing to use the best scientific information possible. It's been, in the last 20 years, there's been one known entanglement in the state of Maine and 0 deaths on right whales. And we fear that the National Marine Fisheries Service has stamped the Maine lobster industry with an expiration date, and our industry could be wiped out within the next decade. This will have a huge economic impact on our state, our hotels, all of our local restaurants, as well as the small fishing families and villages that are around us and up and down the coast. We believe our only hope to save the Maine lobster industry is to protect all of those businesses, is to rely and file a lawsuit against the federal government. The Maine Lobstermen Association is asking everyone who has a stake in the industry to step up and contribute. Many local lobstermen, businesses, and such have contributed in the lawsuit this far. The bottom line is we will not be successful in court if we can't afford to pay the legal bills, and we know that the federal government 10-year whale plan is based on erroneous data, but we need to prove it in court. I ask on behalf of the Maine Lobstermen Association and the lobstermen in Kennebunkport that business owners or anybody that's sitting and watching this tonight, that they consider supporting the Maine Lobstermen Association and the state of Maine fishery itself in a numeral donation. I look forward to being able to continue fishing for years in this industry, as well as maybe my kids or others, and I think we all know that it's a really big impact on all of our restaurants, and they bring a lot of people to this town. I'd got some information earlier that 3 or 4 years ago, the town invested roughly $600,000 in Government Wharf towards their new wharf project. Cape Porpoise is coming up on a new wharf project, and the town looking to spend probably another $600,000, with another probably $300,000 in repairs in the last few years. $1.5 million invested into our fishing community that may not be here in the next 10 years if we don't do something to combat these changes. So I just wanted to put that out to you guys and let you know that some of the surrounding towns have supported us recently. And that's all I have to say about that. If anybody's interested in donating, it's www.savemainelobsterman.org. So you can find a link there.
You want to say that again, Chris?
It's savemainelobsterman.org.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chris. Kevin, are you going to speak, or?
My name's Kevin Kelly, and I'm with the Maine Lobstermen's Association as well. It's based in Kennebunk. I can't speak better than Chris can because he's out there every day. But I just wanted to say it's hard to believe that this threat is real. To think about Maine without lobster is it's just something you can't wrap your brain around, but it is real. And I wanted to add that we have the support of the governor, Janet Mills, and the entire congressional delegation, Senator Collins, Senator King, Representatives Pingree, and Jared Golden as well. So they're on our side, and we're trying our best. So again, the website is savemainelobsterman.org. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation.
Are there any questions from the board? No. Well, as I had told you before the meeting, and I will say publicly, we cannot take a vote on this. Alan Daggett and I are both members of the Maine Lobstermen's Association. For those who don't know, I'm a fifth-generation lobsterman, lobster out of Cape Porpoise, and Alan is a lobster dealer and owns Cape Porpoise Lobster and Port Lobster here in town. But we certainly support you, and I know the two of us as individuals have made significant contributions, and I hope to, speaking for myself, to be able to do so again this year. But certainly I appreciate your coming this evening, and I think that it's very important because one of the things you didn't say, but I will, this is not about whales. This is about money. And this is simply an opportunity for large NGOs to fundraise and use us as their whipping boy. That's it.
Can I ask one question? Lon?
Absolutely.
There was an article that I was reading last week that said that the right whales, because of the warming of the Gulf of Maine, the right whales are now more towards Nova Scotia, their home grounds are now towards Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mike. The copepods, which is the right whale's primary food source, as the Gulf of Maine is warmed, and this is what I find ironic, you know, the environmental groups would tell you global warming is real, and I believe it's real. I've seen the changes in the Gulf of Maine in my 30-year career. But they would tell you that's true all day long, but when you present them with the science that the primary food source of the right whale is leaving, they'll tell you that that's not true. What you saw on TV is most likely the truth. I've lobstered, as like I said, 30 years. My father's lobstered 60 years, probably more than that, been all over the Gulf of Maine, and said he's never seen a right whale, and neither have I. And you probably don't see too many, do you, Chris?
No, to echo what Ed said, the science that we have found shows that the whales don't hardly ever enter the state waters, and that they are following their food source away. I haven't seen a right whale. I've seen, quite a few whales, but none that I could identify as a right whale. And that's part of the science that we're trying to prove, that they're just not here. Not that they don't exist, we just don't see them. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
We'll definitely pass the word on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Item number 5, this will be a Zoom presentation on greenhouse gas inventory. Corinna, can you speak to us this evening?
Yeah, so we've got Corinna up
There
here.
she is. Hello.
Hi, Corinna.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right, so I think I'm going to try and share my screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, let's see how it goes. And thank you all for having me tonight and letting me participate remotely. Definitely makes it a little easier. Okay, can you see the beginning of my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. All right. So thank you everyone so much for having me tonight. As you all mentioned, I'm presenting tonight on the Kennebunkport Greenhouse Gas Inventory, which is a project that we have just completed this month with the help of the Planning Department in Kennebunkport and with Lori's help. So as many of you know, I'm Karina Grader. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator with Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, your local regional planning organization. And tonight I'm presenting on the Kennebunkport Greenhouse Gas Inventory Report, which I believe the report was shared with you all in your packet. So tonight I'm just going to give a high-level overview of what the report contains. There we go. All right. So just wanted to take a moment to go over again the history of the recent climate change work in Kennebunkport that we've all been working on over the past couple years to get us to why we decided to do this project in the first place. So in 2019, Kennebunkport was one of the founding members of the SMPDC Regional Sustainability and Resilience Program, which is part of how I became part of SMPDC. To support your community and others on climate change and sustainability work. And following that, your board approved a set of climate change goals and priorities in 2020. And since then have been working hard to start to tackle those goals and priorities, one of which was Kennebunkport in 2021 contracted to buy Maine solar energy for municipal electricity use. And ongoing throughout this time, Kennebunkport has been working on a comprehensive planning process that's integrated climate change throughout the plan as a central theme. And most recently, Kennebunkport has joined the state's new Community Resilience Partnership, which is a program run out of the Governor's Office of Policy Innovation and the Future to help and support communities who are interested in making their communities more resilient and providing a lot of grant funding through that program. And so that gets us to this project. If you remember back in your climate change goals and priorities, goal number 1 was to establish a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, target, and plan. And so this report and project addresses the first part of that, which is the greenhouse gas emissions inventory itself. And a greenhouse gas emissions inventory is just exactly what it says, a summary of all the emissions from sources within a community. And the purpose of it is to help understand ongoing activities and major sources of emissions. And then with that understanding, be able to identify areas to focus future emission reduction efforts or strategies. So to develop that target and to develop that plan. It helps to establish those goals and track your progress towards those goals. And it can facilitate the decision-making about future policies and strategies that are in the plan itself. And so what I'm sharing with you today is the Kennebunkport Greenhouse Gas Inventory Report, and that actually includes 2 inventories in it. The first is the community-wide inventory, and that is an estimation of all the greenhouse gas emissions associated with community sources and activities. So that's basically all the emissions associated with Kennebunkport's residents, its workforce, visitors, and economy. So basically any activity that happens within the jurisdictional boundary of Kennebunkport is included. And then the second inventory is the municipal greenhouse gas inventory. And that's a much more focused report and summary. It is estimating only the emissions that occur because of local government operations. So due to Kennebunkport's municipal operations itself, including those from government buildings and facilities, government fleet vehicles, and the wastewater treatment facilities. And the purpose is to just provide a whole context of all the different types of emissions happening to inform your community's future strategies to address greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm just going to give a very high-level overview of the inventories, and if you're looking for more detail, much of it can be found in the report. It can get very extensive, but we're just going to stick with the big categories here. And so first is the community-wide inventory. And for the community-wide inventory, we calculated it for 2019. That's the most recent year we have data for that's not 2020, which was a bit of an odd year, so we wanted to stick with what we consider a normal year. And so for 2019, the community-wide emissions were estimated at 48,387 metric tons of what's called carbon dioxide equivalent. And that's basically, carbon dioxide equivalent is used because, while most greenhouse gas emissions are of CO2 or carbon dioxide, there's also emissions of methane and a gas called nitrous oxide. So we want to be able to account for all of those. So you use this equivalent factor. But to give you an idea of how much that really is, the 48,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent is about the same as the emissions from 10,400 plus passenger cars driven for a year. So driving on the road all the time, or about 112,000 barrels of oil consumed.
Corinna?
So, yeah.
We have someone that has a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I can't see anyone.
I just had a question about, and going through, I went through most of the detail. And I'd like to know, how did we capture the impact of tourist cars and that kind of traffic, or is this just?
So I could hear someone asking a question, but I couldn't actually hear what was said. If someone could repeat it. Yeah.
The question is, how did we capture the impact of tourist cars versus just resident vehicles?
Yeah, so the way we measured transportation emissions is using a platform called Streetlight Data, which uses location-based services, or basically cell phone location data, that over the course of the year, and you perform some analysis from their sample to estimate basically how many miles folks are traveling within and to and from Kennebunkport. So it doesn't differentiate based on resident or visitor. It's just, is a cell phone in a car traveling in Kennebunk, and if so, from where and for how long?
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I will keep on going a little bit here to show you the inventory broken down as a graph. And so this is the whole inventory broken down into a little bit smaller segments called different categories or subsectors. And you can see the different chunks of bars represent each subsector's emissions. And from this graph, you can see that the largest source of emissions from Kennebunkport is passenger vehicles. So they account for about 34.5% of the total emissions inventory. So like was asked in the question, that includes both the passenger vehicles driven by Kennebunkport residents, by tourists, and by employees of the businesses. So all those vehicles together result in those emissions. And then the second largest source of emissions is energy use in residential buildings. So that's 32.5%. That's both electricity use as well as heating fuel use for heating buildings. And the largest of those residential emission sources is heating oil use for building heating for boilers. And then also commercial vehicles and buildings play a significant role in the emissions inventory. And then over on the far right, the smaller categories are the categories related to waste. So emissions from the processing of the solid waste and of wastewater. And while not insignificant, they are much smaller than the other categories. So to summarize some key takeaways from the community-wide inventory, as I mentioned, the largest source of community-wide greenhouse gas emissions is passenger vehicle use. That's not really a surprise. If you've ever seen the state of Maine greenhouse gas inventory, that's also the largest source of emissions in the whole statewide inventory. So thinking of just transportation and passenger vehicle use as part of that. So when we're thinking about strategies for reducing emissions, certainly strategies that target the vehicles driven by Kennebunkport's residents, by commuters, by visitors, is an area to explore in depth. And then the second largest source is residential heating fuel use, and particularly heating oil use. So strategies that target fuel switching. So how do you get people to not use heating oil and instead install heat pumps, or and also strategies to make buildings more energy efficient can be explored as well to have a big impact on community-wide emissions. And then while there's no single silver bullet or one large category that's going to make a drastic impact on reducing emissions, the energy used for vehicles and building, heating, and electricity make up the majority of the greenhouse gas inventory, over 90%. So those are certainly areas to focus and target efforts and resources. And then one thing that we didn't talk about much here, but is detailed in the report, is the methodology and the quality of the data for the calculating emissions for these different categories. And really, commercial building heating fuel use is something that we calculate an emissions factor for, but it's really general and vague. And so, but commercial heating fuel use is important. So it would be helpful to have a better understanding of how much heating fuel is used by the commercial buildings in Kennebunkport in order to target specific strategies to those buildings, because right now we really just have a fuzzy picture. So that's the community-wide inventory, and now I'll quickly go through the municipal inventory. And again, a big takeaway. So the municipal inventory, this is actually the same inventory that was calculated by an intern, Sarah Merriam, in 2019. We just took it and updated it and added some additional data to it. But since we already had the 2018 data, we decided to stick with that year rather than try and collect more data for 2019. And that inventory, we calculated that approximately 1,204 metric tons of carbon dioxide was emitted due to the municipal buildings, municipal fleet, employee commute, all those categories of directly things controlled by the municipality of Kennebunkport. And that is approximately the same as the emissions from 259 passenger cars driven for 1 year. So it's pretty easy to see that the municipal emissions are a lot smaller than the community-wide emissions. And that's something important to think about as you're starting to develop strategies for where you're going to prioritize targeting greenhouse gas emissions actions. So again, this is the municipal inventory displayed as a bar graph. And the biggest bar you can see is 57% of municipal emissions are estimated to be from wastewater treatment, which is, yes, in one part from the wastewater treatment plant that uses electricity and heating fuel, but it's also the emissions of nitrous oxide from both the wastewater treatment plant processing, as well as from the septic systems in Kennebunkport. It's not something people think about a lot, but septic systems do emit gases that need to be accounted for. But unfortunately, they're not something that you can really do much to reduce, but it's just important to know, that it's there and something that's contributing. The next significant source of emissions for the municipality is the vehicle fleet at 20%. Those are the municipally owned vehicles. And then after that, at 14%, the buildings and facilities operated and owned by the municipality. So the main key takeaway from the municipal inventory is that, again, community-wide emissions are far greater than municipal emissions, about 4,000 times greater when you actually compare them. And so that's really important to keep in mind as once you start developing strategies. We have limited resources and limited time. So strategies that target the community-wide inventory might have a bigger impact than strategies that only focus on municipal emission sources. But all that being said, it's easier to target those municipal emission sources. So oftentimes strategies targeting the municipal fleet, electricity use in the wastewater treatment plant, and heating fuel use in buildings can still be really effective and important, but just something to keep in mind. And then I wanted to finish up with a few other key takeaways. So these inventories include everything we can calculate emissions for, but they don't include everything. I mean, there's some things that's really hard to understand their emissions impact, things like food waste or recycling, or like just educating your community about climate change and behavior change and what impact that has on changing emissions, it's hard to tell. So in the report, we include alternative indicators of climate action. And those are a bunch of different indicators you can use to track and identify strategies for climate action, but not to directly translate those into an amount of carbon dioxide emitted. And here are a few examples of those. On the left, we have the number of efficiency main rebates that have been claimed by residents of Kennebunkport. The gray line is heat pump rebates, and you can see those have significantly increased over the years. And the blue line is weatherization rebates, so rebates for insulating your attic or your basement, and those have been sort of flat and, if anything, decreasing recently. So good things to keep in mind, but without having to look at them as emissions factors, which is great. And then on the right is the number of registered hybrid and electric vehicles in Kennebunkport. The yellow line is the number of hybrid vehicles, and you can see that the number of hybrid vehicles registered in Kennebunkport has been increasing pretty significantly, but it's still not a ton of vehicles. There's about 4,000 vehicles registered in Kennebunkport, and in 2020, only 92 were hybrids. So still a long way to go in increasing that amount. And then the other three lines are just your standard electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and little like neighborhood electric vehicles like smart cars. And you can see that the numbers for those are still very low, increasing slowly but surely, but still not a significant amount of the vehicles in Kennebunkport. So those are just a few of the alternative indicators in the report. There's a lot more, and I welcome you to explore them and also think of other ones that would be helpful to track in Kennebunkport. And then my final takeaway is that this inventory establishes a baseline, and once Kennebunkport does start implementing targeted strategies to try and reduce emissions, a future inventory in 2 to 4 years after a plan has been established and targets have been made, it would be useful to reconduct the inventory to see how progress is going on those emission reduction efforts. And so this is just a summary of those key takeaways again, and I'll quickly go through them. That the largest source of community-wide emissions is passenger vehicle fuel use. The second largest source is residential heating fuel use, and particularly heating oil use. That the energy used for vehicles and building heating and electricity make up the vast majority of the greenhouse gas inventory for the community-wide inventory, but that a better understanding of commercial building heating fuel use is needed to develop targeted strategies. And then again, the community-wide emissions are far, far greater than municipal-only emissions, and that alternative indicators can be used to identify other strategies to reduce emissions that are not captured in this inventory. And then finally, it's worth thinking about doing another inventory in a few years to evaluate Kennebunkport's progress on emission reduction efforts. So what's next? You know, we've done the inventory, and the rest of the climate change goal number 1 was develop an inventory, target, and plan. So that's really what's next. As you're probably aware, Kennebunkport is participating with SMPDC and a number of other towns to do a climate action planning process. And I'm happy to share with you all today, if you haven't seen it yet, that SMPDC was awarded a grant from the Community Resilience Partnership to help Kennebunkport and these other communities do a climate action planning process. And so we've been starting to get the ball rolling on that, and I really look forward to working with you all as we go through that process. I appreciate your time today to go over this report. I know it was a lot, but I welcome any comments or questions now or in the future about the report, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Corinna. That was very comprehensive, to say the least. Are there any questions from the board? Do I have a motion to adopt the analysis? I have a first. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much,
you.
Corinna.
Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Yeah. All right. moving on to item number 6, update on the comprehensive plan strategies. I believe we have Warner. I thought we had Eli. We have Warner.
Well, you have us both this evening.
Okay.
So, good evening, everyone. As you all know, the Growth Planning Committee has been working diligently through the updates to the comprehensive plan. One of the pieces that we're working on with them is going through all of the different strategies that are identified in the comp plan.
Can I just pause for a minute? David James in the virtual audience has his hand raised.
Okay. David, can we put David on?
Can you hear me?
I can, David. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, David, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay, my only concern is that, and this happened last week, 2 weeks ago with the planning board and the board of selectmen, is the audio doesn't come through for some people. Either they're not talking into the microphone or their microphone's not working. Some of them come through fine, but some of them I can't hear at all. So I just ask you to make sure you're using the mics. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You're up, Warner.
All right. So we've been working through the strategies part of the comp plan right now, and so it's a little different than what we've done before in the past, and where we've taken all of the draft strategies and sent them along to all the different parties, that play a role in the town's comprehensive plan, and have been working with them in terms of soliciting feedback, making modifications. These are the things that are going to come back to these groups and committees for long-term implementation. And so we've been working up front with them in order to get buy-in and feedback. And so, Board of Selectmen, you all are also one of the identified groups that are identified in the comp plan. And you may ask, say, well, what's our role here? And so, as you'll note, looking at the different strategies, there's strategies that deal with either financial stewardship in terms of budget process, and also things that deal with the direction of town inventory in terms of property and things of that nature. And so my intent here tonight is not to necessarily go through all of these as they've been provided to you all, but primarily to take any questions or comments that you have on any of the strategies that have been identified, and if there's any that we may need to work and tweak.
I got some
Great.
questions.
Yes.
Yeah. I was on the Growth Planning Committee for 4 years or so, back early on the first go around to trying to get approved at the state level. And we had so many goals and strategies and objectives and so forth. And then after that, the comprehensive plan got approved, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we had a couple versions there.
So going through this strategies and goals and everything else that we got here is eerily familiar. And I would like to ask a question about who monitors that comprehensive plan to see what is or is not followed up and what is or is not completed, because I suspect that when you go through all of these, which I agree with, by the way, there's nothing I don't agree with. There aren't enough people in the universe, let alone Kennebunkport, to address the section that would be applicable to the selectmen. Or it's not just the selectmen, it's Parks and Rec and all those people. So I'm trying to find out what is the what really do we want to accomplish? I mean, we can't do all of these. So are we going to go through an exercise where we whittle them down to priorities? These are not in priority order. They're just there. So how are we going to do this? Because I don't want to be part of something that's not measured. Okay, what's the sense? Okay, so and if that's the case, how do we do it? And then who's going to do it? I mean, you got 5 selectmen, you got, I don't know how many now in your planning department, probably 5 total. And Parks and Rec and so forth. There's not enough days in the year to have meetings that you need to have to work these things out. So I'm asking, it's a good plan, how do we prioritize the plans so that they make sense to us?
Sure. No, that's a great question, Mike. And it's, what you've identified, is a specific issue that I think every community in the state of Maine has to deal with in terms of how the comprehensive planning process and legislation is structured. There are so many different items there that, and it is not uncommon, I think, for communities to have comp plan fatigue. They go through this process, they develop the plan, and then and then it gets set on the shelf. So Kennebunkport is unique in the sense that you have a separate committee, that's been tasked with dealing with and monitoring the comprehensive plan, and that's your growth planning committee. As you all know, we did this process a little bit differently in the past where it took us a good many years, to adopt the comp plan. And while we did wind up with a fully vetted, fully adopted comp plan, I do think a lot of, the growth planning committee's time was really spent on creating those chapter pieces, and by the time you really got done with it, we were ready to start over again. And so it's certainly, not the state doesn't intend for communities to do it quite that way, but it's a process that we, chose and undertook. Now, one of the pieces that isn't set in here in the strategies piece here is a timeline that ultimately, and we'll wind up going through this with growth planning in terms of some of these are ongoing strategies because many of these, identify things that we're already doing as a community. Some of these are not new items, but they're intended to provide for support, specifically when we deal, like, for instance, with grant applications and things like that. So there'll be an identification where it says whether or not these are, ongoing items or not. And then typically there's also a category where you start to put in a timeline in terms of what's the time frame in which you want to try to accomplish that. And that's a piece that we have to work with.
So how have we done on the last comprehensive plan as compared to what the plan was and what actually got done?
Well, and to your point, and I don't think that necessarily, I'm not aware of any community that gets fully through all of their strategies in a comp plan over a 10-year period.
I'll settle for a couple. I just want to know
Sure.
what they are.
Yeah.
And I would say that's what I don't want to be part of something that we put up. You just use the word, you put it up on the shelf.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's the sense?
Yeah.
So.
What I can envision with this is that once we get through the process of adopting the comp plan, again, you have a committee that's tasked with specifically dealing with this. I think that it's prudent, once we get through an adoption process, to have those conversations with growth planning to help prioritize how we work through those. Certainly the departments that are assigned to all of these will have input in that. Some are easier than others. Some are ongoing, some are things that we already do. Some are, some of these are dreams that have been in, the past 3 versions of comp plans.
But we don't have, why I'm asking this is, I don't see anything here that says what the expected results are. Like, what's the goal? All I see is strategies and.
Sure.
And I don't see anything that says, okay, use the example they just came in with 126, whatever, how many vehicles a year, et cetera, we generate and emissions. How do we tackle that? I mean, how do you measure that? I know we say we're going to monitor that. I guess that's going to be somebody else, but it's in this too. So.
Right.
I mean, it's a good, don't get me wrong, everything that's in here is things we should be doing. Question is, how do we do it?
So just to give some feedback, I think those are great questions because those are similar conversations I had with Eli and Werner over the last few weeks. And sometimes when you read the comp plan, it feels like everything's been thrown in the bucket. And so, like you said, how do you measure that progress? Or what does that strategy actually mean? How do you physically create that strategy? I would say that over the last 10 years, I think that, the fiscal goals, I think that the town has done a good job of meeting those in terms of reinvesting in its capital and infrastructure, maintaining a stable financial picture. I think that Mike Claus, while he was here, took those comp plan goals regarding bicycle and pedestrian access and improving roadways, he used those. I think that we have used those in terms of public participation and used them in terms of when we've applied for grants. I think that the consultants feel like more in the bucket is better, because you're looking at a 10-year plan and so much might change in that 10 years. And so if you have more in the bucket, it's going to give you more flexibility to address issues. And that's probably more common in comp plans. But I think my struggle is, like you said, so you've got hundreds of strategies in this plan, and who determines what's the strategy we're going to work on this week and whether we were successful? And I think that's really where the Board of Selectmen and Growth Planning Committee can work more in partnership to say, these are the priorities, on an annual basis.
We certainly got the first half of it right. It's comprehensive. But the way I look at it is it's more of a roadmap. As we work our way through, having been on the board 9 years, sometimes, as an individual selectman, I look for guidance within the town. And, I agree with Mike, this is way too much to actually try to implement all of it. But as we move forward and as, we move into the future, I've certainly seen the town change a lot in my 50 years. And, even in the last, especially in the last 20. But, we have with this some sort of a roadmap as situations arise where we can look to this for guidance, because it will have been voted on by the entire community. That's kind of
Yeah.
my understanding. But as far as sitting down and going through it and trying to implement them all, no, that's a road.
No, that's
As
what
E.
I want.
Schneider would say, that's,
Nope.
the compulsion to know everything is the road to insanity.
This is just a guide.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, some things are more important in this guide than others. So I think as the years go by, you would look at this and say, well, this is really important this year. We haven't done any of this, so we should be doing some more. It's just a guide.
Yeah.
Well, and some of these too presume that there may be funding opportunities that arise, and it may, some of these goals, are, they're not, they're not small. And so, but by having the supportive language, that, as you mentioned, that is voted upon by the town, it provides that additional support to say, yes, the community is already behind this as a goal, and, helps with, that type of
But don't we owe the
fiscal
voters
requests.
If we've done a lot on the last comprehensive plan, I know we have, there's not questioning that. What, don't we owe the voters some kind of a report that says, here was a comprehensive plan, we accomplished this, this, and this, and oh, by the way, we're gonna vote on another one, is it November, we're gonna vote in November?
It's correct. That's
Yeah,
that's the timeline and the
Yeah,
goal.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, which is good, but shouldn't we have some kind of a, it's obvious to probably some of us here and some of you up there that we've accomplished on, the fiscal stuff and everything else, but don't we owe that to the voters to have a summary of what we accomplished on the prior comprehensive plan?
I think that's that's a valid point. It's not something that we have put together or put forward, but I think that's something that we can consider doing.
I just think, I know you're busy, you've got a lot of stuff to do right now, but I just think that ought to be part of the way we set it up. So, it's like being in business. You set a goal, at the end of the year, you're supposed to make so much money, and you're supposed to if you don't make it, you don't go back to the voter, you gotta do something that shows that you've made the progress. It's like Yogi Berra says, you come to a fork in the road and you take it. And I don't wanna be that one. I wanna know which fork I wanna take.
Sure. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm good.
Pat, do you have anything?
No.
Alan? We don't need, unless there's any other comments or you have anything else?
No, we just, again, brought these forward. These are the ones that, that have the selectmen identified. And certainly if you all have any feedback that you want to pass along to us, then feel free to do so.
I did have the opportunity to sit in on a few of the meetings, and I was quite impressed, with the things that went on. And, some of those meetings were pretty long, and there was a lot of thought. And, some of it was redundant, but, they worked through it. And I'm glad that you have a committee to do it, because if we had to do it, we'd never get anything accomplished aside from that. So thank you.
Great. No, thank you.
All right. So we don't have any vote tonight. I just wanted to get everybody's feedback.
So just so you know, I'm still getting feedback from the listeners on Zoom that they can't hear the board and that they've got to be right up here.
I think we need to get pin-on microphones.
Can't get any closer.
Yeah. I'm afraid it's going to poke me in the eye. All right, moving on. Number 7, authorized wastewater commitment for FY 2020. So I have the wastewater commitment here. We're looking at about we're actually looking at $1,245,228.42. And here's all the gory details of all of us that will be paying into that this year, aside from all of the taxpayers. But these are the actual sewer users here. Speaking of a way to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions, maybe next year we can just do this digitally.
I'll make a motion to authorize a wastewater commitment for
Second?
fiscal year 22.
All right, I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor? 4-0, the motion passes.
We should tell them the sewer bill's gonna be
I don't have that on here.
Yeah, it's-
I think it's gonna be $499.
$499.52.
Is that what it is? Thank you. Okay, and so we have Denise up here to tell us about writing off $816.45 in uncollectible personal property taxes.
In an attempt to clean up the personal property accounts, we identified 6 accounts that have closed, relocated, or transferred to a new owner. The principal amount is $630.79. The interest amount is $185.66. That was as of the time of this memorandum, so that amount probably has grown by a few more cents than that. We're asking for approval to write these off.
Yeah, these personal property taxes were mostly for businesses which no longer do business or even exist here in Kennebunkport. So,
Correct.
do I have a motion?
Make a motion to write off $816.45 in uncollectible personal property taxes.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, number 9, authorize and sign the June 2022 town meeting warrant. And I have it here.
So there is just one change from the previous versions that you have seen multiple times. We broke out the question about signs into 2 different questions. So instead of 4 ordinance revisions, there's now 5, just to make it more clear what the intention was. So we added question 5, which talks about the internally lit signs, and we just broke it out from the previous question 3, so they're separate now. Otherwise, it's the same warrant that you've seen and voted on multiple times, so at this point, we are complete and ready to go for town meeting.
We're going to have a public hearing on this first, though, correct?
Yes, we're going to vote on that
Yeah,
next.
because yeah.
Yep.
Authorize, I'll make a motion to authorize and sign the June 2022 town meeting warrant.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes. Okay, now we have to have certification of the referendum questions. We need to vote on these one by one.
So these are the same questions that you've seen, again, multiple times. The first question is the amendment to the Kennebunkport Town Code, Chapter 80, Kennebunkport River and Interlocal Agreement. So you are just making amendments to the current ordinance and agreement that will bring it into line with the Kennebunk ordinance, so that both towns match.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes.
All right, so the next one is the amendment to the Kennebunkport Town Code, Chapter 6-12, Harbor and Waterfront. And this just adds the inadvertent omission of Goose Rocks Beach from the definition section.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor? Motion passes.
All right, so number 3 is amendment to Kennebunkport Town Code, Chapter 240, Signs and Billboards. And this one would revise Kennebunkport's permanent and temporary sign regulations to bring them into compliance with a Supreme Court decision regarding content. So it's really just a housekeeping issue.
So moved.
Second.
A first and a second. All those in favor? Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, the next one is the amendment to the Kennebunkport Town Code, Chapter 147, Streets and Sidewalks. And this one clarifies the allowance of temporary signage within public right-of-way for election and public notices and things like that. And this would also be housekeeping to bring it consistent with state statute.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes 4-0.
All right, and the final one is amendment to Kennebunkport Town Code, Chapter 147, Streets and Sidewalks. And this is the little piece that was broken out from the previous question that would allow the town to place internally lit signs on town-owned property.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 3-1. I believe that's it.
That's it for those, yes.
Oh, yes, and then we have to go through all of the other articles.
Nope, we don't have to do that. The next one, just move on to 11 to countersign the RSU.
Budget, yes.
Yep.
So agenda item number 11 is countersign the RSU 21 budget validation referendum election warrant.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes 4-0. And now we need, number 12, set a public hearing date of May 12th, 2022 to consider the ordinance revisions on the June 14th, 2022 town meeting ballot.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes 4-0. Okay. Item number 13, we will be the election of clerks for 2022, 2022-2024.
So this is just something that's required by state law. Every May 1st of even years, we have to have approval of the proposed election clerks for the next 2 years. So,
Would you like to read them, or would you like me to?
I don't have it in front of me, so
Okay,
if
I
you
will.
don't
So
mind.
this is, first of all, we need to appoint you, don't we? No.
Nope, I'm
No,
already
These are
appointed.
just the election workers?
Yes.
Okay, so we
Ballot
have
clerks.
Democrats, Kate Acker, Ann Adams, Anne Marie Briggs, Leslie Cargill, Helen Cornorant, Jean Cornorant,
Conity.
thank you. I think I need glasses.
Janet Acker.
Janet, okay. Connie Dykstra, April Dufault, Geraldine Fitzgerald, Penelope Gurin, yeah. Here we go. Jennifer Izabicki, Richard Izabicki, Leslie Ann James, Claire Julian, Mary McLaughlin, Rebecca Nolette, Susan Richards, Republicans, Doug Dicey, Janet Dicey, Diane T. France, Mary Jane Grant, Steve Reed, Karen Schlegel, Michael E. West, Audrey Williamson, Rose Wills, and unenrolled Grayson Adams and Scott Nolette.
And just to be clear, we can add to this at any time. This isn't, all-inclusive. And we don't have to use each person every election. It's kind of just we're nominating them, so if they're available, we can use them.
Great. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to number 14. Set mooring fees to be effective January 1st, 2023. So this will not affect the mooring fees that will be due this year for 2022. This is just a housekeeping issue. This was going to move the fees from $45 outside of Cape Porpoise Harbor and the intertidal fees to $90, which will bring everybody up to the $90 fee structure for those who are not members of Cape Porpoise Pier. Those members pay more, but also get use of the pier. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to set the mooring fees to $90 for all moorings, effective January 1st, 2023.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Motion passes 4-0. All right, we are going to authorize a quit claim deed of map ID 2022-3-9 at 133 Main Street to the estate of Lisa Gunther.
At the last board meeting, we came to you and requested to be able to accept payment from the owner who deceased, from her sister and brother, and we did in fact receive that payment, and we are requesting approval to process a quitclaim on that.
Do I have a motion?
We have a motion to authorize the quitclaim deed in regards to 133 Main Street, and I'm glad this all worked out.
Absolutely. I have a second.
Second.
Okay, first and a second. All those in favor? Motion passes 4-0. Okay, item number 16, authorize a quit claim deed of map ID 23-1-27C on Beechwood Avenue to the Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust.
And in the amended agenda, it was corrected to 23-1-27C, which
Yeah.
was incorrect.
Mr. Chairman, I must recuse myself.
Okay. Do I have a motion to? Absolutely. Please approach the podium, Robin.
I have a couple questions.
Can you state your name, please?
Oh, Robin Phillips,
Thank you.
Kennebunkport. There's quite a lot of confusion about the Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust in general in town. And I have a couple questions. Does the Board of Selectmen have absolute power to give the land away without, asking the people?
We only have power to give away land that was acquired through
Right.
through tax acquisition, and that's voted on every year at our annual town meeting, that
Right.
authorization.
Have you considered that maybe Habitat for Humanity houses should be
They
included?
don't have the resources right now. They have two projects on Mills Road, and they can't afford to put the other one up because the price of housing materials, because they have a different, I asked the same question. Because they're also an excellent
They are,
organization.
and people seem to prefer the look of them and the fact that there is a sweat equity requirement, and they also have a lower income requirement, so that really addresses some people there's a lot of people that don't qualify for the heritage houses. So I'm for affordable housing and finding solutions for sure, but, the heritage houses, you can make up to, $90,000 and get one, and so when people hear that and they realize they don't have to pay land taxes and they don't have a building permit fee, to a lot of locals, I don't earn,
But
you know what I
but they
mean?
don't. But they also don't, own the property either. It's held. Correct me if I'm wrong, Pat. Isn't it held by the trust itself or in community, like isn't a condo?
Yes, the land is held by the trust.
Yes. And we have, Robin, right across the street from this particular property, we gave land away when I first came onto the board to the Habitat. And a local somebody who grew up here and is a combat veteran of the United States Army. I was very proud. I had the honor to give him the keys, he and his
Oh,
family.
yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, so we have,
Yeah.
and, they have not reached out to us, to the best of my knowledge, since then, and asked for any property. But
Well-
we're always willing to work with them.
I think what a lot of people would, I mean, we all know affordable housing, I was lucky, my grandmother,
Yep.
was born at Goose Rocks, and they didn't sell their land, although they were approached a lot. So I know it's hard, and I don't make a lot of money. But there are people that consider, if $90,000 seems a little high to have an income, if you're not going to include people that say earn 30 and, smaller homes, like, it just, I think it's just something that needs to be worked out, but I do think that when people hear the selectmen without feedback can just take one organization and support them and then not hear something else, I just think maybe a broader view of the affordable housing would be nice to explore.
Well, as I said, we have. I mean, we
Yeah.
have given land to the Habitat for Humanity in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah,
We're always here. People can come and ask.
yeah. But I don't think people know that. It's, and people don't even know it, they think they're the same thing, actually.
Well, I don't want the general public to come in and ask us to give them land to build a house. That's not my point.
Oh, no,
but-
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But,
And, someday, we should have affordable housing across the street here. If things progress according to the plan, when I asked for and I say I asked because I was the chairman of the board at that time.
Yeah.
When we asked the taxpayers for the $10 million to buy that land, I would never have asked the taxpayers to expend that kind of money just to make a park out of it. We have a wonderful conservation group right here in town that's done a great job of preserving land.
Yeah.
We don't need, we always could use more, more open spaces or more wooded spaces are great. I don't want to see the ones we have torn down, but we didn't purchase that land with the intent of making a park out of it. So it's just a very expensive proposition, and I hope that when that comes along, we will be able to address some of your concerns, because they're my concerns too.
Yeah, and I've gotten a lot of feedback from people saying, why don't they top dollar market value of some of these pieces, that have been foreclosed on? Maybe we should use some of that money to pay down the village parcel debt, because that's a serious amount of money of interest,
Because then what we will have is if we did,
Yep. It's just
then I'm
people
going to
say
have
that.
another group of people saying, why did you guys sell that land? I wanted to buy it. I didn't know about it. And now there's a house on it, and it looked so much better before when there wasn't. So that's kind of an I have a dog story, as one of my
Yeah.
professors used to say in college. And you can't make all the people happy all the time. You're lucky if you can make a few people happy some of the time.
I would like to see a few people that have less than 80% of the median income be able to qualify for heritage houses.
Well, that is a question for Mr. Briggs.
It's
and his
sort of
or- In
exclusive,
his
you know?
organization, that is, we only created this organization. We do not administer it,
Yeah.
and we do not have oversight over it, which is for the best, trust me.
Robin, I would invite you to take a look at our website, and all the information is set on the website. We use the 80% rate for these 6 houses
Yep.
are addressed to the people who make 80% of the area income.
Right,
Those are the ones you were talking about.
right.
Those are the ones that are living in the houses now.
So none of them, are at the, the
No, to
the
be
higher
honest
amount?
with you, we don't compete with Heritage, with Home
Yeah.
Habitat, but it was interesting comment made to me gratuitously from Habitat,
Yeah,
that they have one of their people going to live in the houses they're building on Mills Road
Yep.
at this time,
yeah,
who made too much money to live in our houses.
right. Really?
Yes. So that's the truth.
Yeah,
That came from Habitat.
Yep, yep. Well, see, this is the thing, it's very hard to navigate the whole
Well, you
affordable
have
housing.
to do some digging
Well,
around.
I
The
have
information
looked.
is out there if you.
No, I've looked at your website several times. And I have actually reached out to someone on the board, and, nothing came back. So what I'm telling you, just because I have spoken with many people in the last couple months, they don't know what's happening, and a lot of people don't really agree with the fact that there's, a loss of revenue on land taxes, and I understand they don't own the land, but what is the small fee, you call it, that they pay for the land?
Robin, that's not true about the land taxes, because when the town owns it, the piece down by my house on
Yeah.
Main Street, we were collecting no tax because the town owned it.
Right, I
So if we taxed
understand that.
ourselves, then it would have just in one hand and out the other. So
Right.
now we are collecting property tax on that. So we have added to the tax rolls, and the same with this piece that we're talking about this evening.
I understand that, but it's the point that someone makes $90,000 and doesn't, I would like to know the fees they're paying. Aren't you guys paying the town, you own the land?
But that's not a question for this board, Robin. I mean, I appreciate,
Okay.
I appreciate your questions, but that is not a question to ask the Board of Selectmen, because we are not the entity. It's just a happy coincidence that Pat
Right.
happens to be
I just thought
involved
he
in it.
might be able to answer since you are the head of it, right? You know.
But that's not a question to be asked here
Okay.
at the Board of Selectmen meeting. You know, that's something
Okay.
that you should ask them
Yep.
at one of their meetings, or ask Pat after the meeting. I'm
Yep.
sure he's happy to speak
Yeah,
to you.
no, that's
to
no
you
problem.
about it.
I just, wanted you to know there is, questions of this nature about the absolute power to just, do whatever with tax-acquired land. That's all. And I do support affordable housing. I know it's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
I have a
Okay.
question, I have
Yep.
a question for Pat. Pat, how many kids have moved into those houses over the last year? How many new kids do we
7.
have? 7
Yeah.
kids. Now, that's a wonderful thing in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, we need more kids
Yeah.
in our schools, and we need more kids in our community. So I think the Heritage Trust has done a wonderful job. That's my opinion.
I'm
not
criticizing, I'm just telling you, there's people in this town that have a hard time paying their taxes, and there's nothing for them.
We have programs for that.
To assist,
Yes, yes. Well, we deal, the town, well, I don't know if we have direct programs to pay your property tax, but we have programs to help people with their heating assistance, yeah, but our taxes are ridiculously low in this town. I mean, you look at the surrounding towns, we would all be paying a lot more. And I say that because I'm very proud of it. The members, I've served on this board, as I said, 9 years, and for the most part, it's been the same board. And when we have consistently held our taxes far below surrounding communities. And people ask me, why is that? And I say, because, we respect our taxpayers. We are consistently told that they appreciate the fact that our taxes are low, and they would like to see it that way. And it's sometimes we have to go up on taxes. That's just, there's too much money in the economy right now, and we're in a period of hyperinflation. But we've done a good job.
Well, that's true, compared to other towns, you have, but
Yes.
things are going up, and there are people like me who are just normal people that don't make a ton of money, and, even though my taxes are.
Well, we're not going to tax anybody out of town, not as long as I sit on this board.
All right, I'll hold you to that.
Thank you. Okay, so number 16, do I have a motion on this?
So moved.
Okay. All right, that's right, Pat can't vote. So all those in favor? 3-0. Thank you. Okay, other business. Pat, you have any other business?
No, not tonight, thank you.
Mike?
I have none.
No? None? Lori?
No, I just want to make sure everybody knows that we received word from the U.S. Economic Development Administration this week that the town was successful in receiving an EDA grant of $2.2 million for the Cape Porpoise Pier Project. So we are very thankful for that. We are taking the pier project through the planning board process currently. And our goal is that we would put it out to bid and hopefully be in construction mode in November.
That's a wonderful thing.
It sure is. And I would just like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. It's nice, again, like I said the last time, it's nice to see everybody and be here in person. So thank you for that. Do I have a motion for the warrants?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And everybody's favorite, number 19, adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
So here are all the signatures.